I want to talk about Phil Brooks, a.k.a. CM Punk. We were in Chicago. It seems like 10 years ago now, but we were in Chicago last summer for NHL Media Days, plural. Yeah. And we ran into Phil, and we hadn't met Phil before, and he was both a gentleman and a scholar, and he's a great dude, and he's been kind enough to join us here on this edition of Tim and Sid as we go back on TV coast to coast here in Canada. Phil, welcome to the show. How are things with you? How are the loved ones? What's the situation?
We are as good as we possibly can be. Appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you very much. I feel like I'm one of the fortunate ones. You know, we're kind of built for this. I stay indoors most of the time anyway. I do miss a few things here and there. I certainly miss my hockey, miss my baseball, but you know, we're making do. I think we're some of the lucky ones. You know,
and we've constantly giving credit to those who are out there doing the real work that allows us to stay home and kind of sort of be a distraction. And that's been our role throughout this 8 weeks of radio and now on TV, is to be the distraction. But I got to ask you, like, what have you learned about yourself in quarantine? Like, Sixero is actually doing this thing called exercising. I've started to meditate. What have you learned about yourself?
I've learned that I have a large enough house that if me and my wife get on each other's nerves, we can both go into different parts of the house and kind of take a little vacation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I hear it. Phil Brooks, a.k.a. CM Punk, joining us here on Tim and Sid. Phil, I mean, there's been two of the few events or forms of entertainment that have been going on here without fans is obviously professional wrestling and now the UFC over the weekend. You know what it's like to have a crowd at both. I'll start from this past weekend in Jacksonville. Did you catch it? What stuck out to you about the atmosphere specifically? And if you can also comment on how it is professional wrestlers can do what they do without the pop in the building to let them know that what they're doing is actually working.
Yeah, right. That's the big thing. For UFC, I don't think it's going to shake a lot of guys. I think you train in a gym with no audience. You know, you have hard sparring sessions. Sure, the live audience can factor in to an adrenaline, like surge or dump, negative or positive. But, you know, the thing is with real sports, there's when it's not predetermined like pro wrestling is, I feel like, you know, you have a singular goal, it's to win. For wrestling, it's dramatically different, right? And I think that's the biggest organization or, you know, sport, entertainment, whatever you want to call it, that suffers. So without the crowd, I think wrestling is really kind of twisted in the wind. It's almost a little bit exposed. Now they've modified some things and they're doing like what I'm calling the movie matches. Like they did one with Undertaker at WrestleMania, and last night they did one where, you know, they're adding soundtracks and they're making cuts like it's a movie, and so that's different. But to go out and essentially wrestle without an audience, that's got to be tough. I mean, I've done it on shows where there were supposed to be people there, but nobody showed up. You know, it's not easy.
Right. CM Punk joining us here on Tim and Sid. I don't want to diminish the card that UFC put on over the weekend, and we'll get to it. But if given the chance to either fight in either situation, would you have gone to Jacksonville and fought under those circumstances? Would you be fighting WWE right now if they allowed you to?
That's a great question. I don't know how much time we have. You know, you got to take into account the organizations, and the biggest thing is if you're scared. And most of the people I know aren't necessarily scared for themselves. Like, I'm not worried about myself. I'm more worried about my wife. She has asthma. You know, I'm worried about my little sister who's a nurse, and she just had her third kid. You know what I mean? So, like, these are the reasons I'm not going to Sunday dinner, you know. So there's people that have, you know, children, wives, they're immune compromised. They don't necessarily feel safe. You know, so to me, it exposes the biggest problem in fighting and in pro wrestling, that there's no union for the men and women. So, you can feel job scared. Like maybe if I don't go, even if I'm not feeling safe, I don't know if there's going to be an opportunity for me tomorrow. You got to factor that into it. And then you got to factor in the fact that this is a very serious pandemic. Like you hear, all shapes and sizes, ages, races, creeds are getting sick and they're dying from this. So it is a serious thing. I do know both organizations are doing everything in their power to, follow all the protocols, testing everybody, cleaning everything. So it's an interesting conversation to have, and I see points on both sides for sure.
Phil Brooks, a.k.a. CM Punk, has been kind enough to join us on this edition of Tim and Sid. Phil, in terms of the card itself over the weekend, based on my timeline, based on my co-host's viewing schedule, based on my WhatsApp chats, it seemed like everyone was kind of dialed in. And I completely understand why. Did you catch most of it? What did you make of it? And at this point, who does Conor McGregor fight next?
I watched all of it. I'm the guy that I watch everything. Fights are on TV. I'm going to watch them. But these were obviously special because this is the first sporting event since everything got shut down. So I liked it. I liked it a lot. It's more to me fight oriented. They're not cutting to the crowd. We don't care if Wilmer Valderrama is sitting in the front row or like some other people. It's about the fight.
Solid builder.
Super interesting that you can you don't gotta mic the corners. You can hear everything everybody's saying. So I just love the rawness and the realness of it. There's pros and cons to having people there, but I almost felt like, even the post-fight interviews, I noticed right off the bat, they just seemed better. I don't know. There's just something different about it. But and I'll be watching again on Wednesday when they put on another show.
No one was playing up to the crowd, right? Like that was the post-fight interview. If you have never been in that situation and you've been on a mic before in your life, so you know what it's like. But when you're in that situation and you're a rookie and you hear a crowd chanting or going crazy, you start playing to that crowd. And I thought we got real answers at the end of fights, which was very, very cool.
Yeah, it was almost more like just a media scrum. You know what I mean? They just happened immediately after, somebody got done fighting. And it just seemed more calm, and I like the way you put it. You got real answers, who's Conor going to fight next? Man, I don't know who he should fight. He should probably fight Tony, but I know Tony's got a busted orbital that needs surgery. Sometimes I think, you can be a matchmaker, but things just kind of work themselves out. And I think you do Gaethje and Khabib. And, when this is all over, you do an eliminator, you do Tony versus Conor.
I am down for every second of that.
Yeah, both of them would make some money.
I am, but that was, but I mean, finally, Phil, the one thing, we know it's a violent sport. When you could hear the Gaethje fight, though, the way we could hear it, like how educational do you think that was for people at home?
I think the people at home will tend to forget about it pretty quick. But, maybe there's a couple dozen people that kind of open their eyes to, my big thing was body shots. People just never seem to respect, the casual civilian doesn't seem to respect the body shot too much. And then, when you hear Pettis kicking Cowboy in the midsection and there's nothing to mask it, it's pretty eye-opening.
Who impressed you the most on that card? Because there was you could rifle through the highlights and name like 6 or 7 different names who really popped on that card. But who impressed you the most with their performance? Was it Gaethje? Was it Ngannou? Who was it?
I think Gaethje for sure, because he showed growth and poise. And there were moments where the old Gaethje would have swung for the fences and maybe gassed himself out, put himself in a dangerous situation. This Gaethje, instead of just putting the pedal to the metal and trying to throw everything at Tony when he had Tony in a compromised position. He kind of backed off a little bit, and not in a bad way, but he was just more patient.
Yeah.
And he waited, and he got the TKO win. So that's impressive when you see guys like Gaethje, who have always fought at a very, very high level, show like those little wrinkles to their game and show that they're learning and they're listening to their coach. And the fact that a guy who's already that dangerous and scary is coachable is pretty impressive to me.
Phil, good stuff. All the best to you and yours. Stay safe, and we appreciate your time. Hopefully we can chat again
thanks for doing that.
Down the line. Enjoy the other 2 cards this week. Take care, brother.
Hey, anytime you guys need me, just call me up. And Renee Young says hello to everybody in Canada.
Hey, nice. Renee Young, there you go. Good to see you. Good to hear from you.
Good one.
Yeah, you too.